Hi there, Peter Fayroian. Great privilege of being the head of Green Hills School, and one of my favorite things to do these days, other than be out there with our wonderful kids, is having really great conversations with our wonderful alums who are out there in the world doing amazing things. This conversation is with another one of those wonderful alums doing amazing things in the world, and she is right there, Priya Bery. Priya is the Chief Executive Officer of Tarsadia Foundation, a foundation that's dedicated to unleashing human potential through global investments in inclusive mobility, crises and threats, and human transformation. Drawing on 20 years of experience, Priya's passion is building bridges and catalyzing partnerships to turn the tide on systemic inequity. Prior to her post leading Tarsadia, Priya was the founding CEO of SOHO Impact, an innovative foundation focused on fostering a creative economy and reinventing education through creativity and play. These recent positions are a continuation of her career as a change agent for good in the business community, as Vice President of Giving for the popular shoemaker Toms. Priya tripled the reach of Tom's social impact and went on to serve as Tom's Chief of Staff and Vice President of Social Entrepreneurship. Priya not only has led Tom's founder, Black Mycosky's $100 million social investment portfolio, but in 2006, she also helped lead Virgin United's founder, Richard Branson's advocacy and philanthropy agenda in her role as Director of Public Affairs and Partnerships. Her remarkable career began on Capitol Hill, serving her home state of Michigan, working for Senator Carl Levin during the Clinton administration. In 2001, she started the Global Business Coalition on HIV/AIDS with the late Ambassador Richard C. Holbrooke, a venture credited for redefining the role of business in addressing the global AIDS crisis. Before earning a Master's of Public Health at Harvard University, Priya studied biopsychology and cognitive science at the University of Michigan. If you haven't heard of it, the little college next door, honors college. And of course, otherwise she wouldn't be here right now. She was prepared for all of this because she is a proud member of Green Hills School, graduating class of 1993. Priya, you must be 90 years old. I'm exhausted reading all the things that you've done since graduation. And actually, before we begin our conversation, you want to shout out to other members of your family who are Green Hills Griffins?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and thank you for that amazing introduction, Peter. And no, a huge shout out. I think first to my brother, Rohit Bery, who's also an alum, class of '88, who really was my coach along my entire Green Hills journey. And so I give him credit for much of what you read out, as well as myself. But the funnest part is that my three nieces, his daughters, are at Green Hills. Serena in the 6th grade, and Annika and Anya in Arbor school. So,
yeah, they might, maybe they might even be walking by.
They might be walking by. I'm going to keep an eye out for them. I told them that I was talking to you today.
Oh, really?
So,
oh, good.
Yeah,
I should have contacted them earlier and said, come by the office and give a wave. But maybe we'll be so lucky. Actually, if they are runners or they're out, our middle school team and upper school teams are out piling into buses right now.
Yeah. Okay. No, we've definitely got one of them on the cross country team.
Okay. Right. Well, she's out there somewhere. I can't see.
Hey, Annika.
Yeah, it's funny. So listen, first, while I have to say I'm a generally optimistic human being, if I were to be pessimistic about the world that my own children are inheriting, reading about your work with the Tarsadia Foundation in particular would give me great hope. So tell us about your work there, and then the foundation itself and its purpose.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, so I joined the Tarcidia Foundation 3 years ago, and took on the leadership role. It's based out of Southern California in Orange County. I live in Los Angeles. And Tarcidia Foundation is a family foundation. So multi-generation family foundation that actually started about 12 years ago. And its roots are in India and Zambia and Southern California. So very global, just based on its footprint and the family's origin story or journey.
Right.
And we're committed, as you kind of said, to unleashing human potential. But the whole kind of remit there is to say that we want to be able to give individuals and communities the tools and the resources so they can be the architects of their own future. So
Yeah.
it's less about saying we want to create, the next 1 million doctors or engineers, or achieve whatever gaps in literacy. It is more about giving, clearing the runway so that communities can unleash their own vision for their futures. And so that's kind of why we take this very broad focus. The first is around addressing crises and threats. And so that's about like meeting basic needs. So food and housing security, for example, and we do that work in the US, but we also do it in Southern Africa. We also do it in India and a little bit in Latin America as well. And then that relates to the next kind of area around the inclusive economies, or what we call inclusive mobility, so that people can not just survive but thrive and be agents for themselves, whether they be entrepreneurs or participate in the marketplace, such that it works for them and their communities. And then the third is very much about coming full circle. So, we have this huge honor and ability to be able to support communities, but we also know that giving, yes, it benefits communities, but it also benefits yourself. And that's where we kind of come up with this philosophy of human transformation and interconnectedness. And if we can build a movement of compassion and gratitude, that we can create a more interconnected world to drive positive change. So to your point about, things are messy right now. It's a weird time, and this weird time is not a moment. We're a few years in now, and it's going to keep going. And so I think for me, the biggest, light, particularly amidst the COVID crisis and the racial justice uprisings, was being able to be in a leadership role where I was actually able to do something to help people. So, while I was trapped at home on this Zoom screen, I was fortunate enough to be able to support communities because we had the resources and the support from our board to be able to just get out there, no questions asked, and go for it. So that's a little bit of what I'm up to now. I'm happy to go deeper.
No, well, yes, please. So tell me, give us one or two examples of your work with Tarsadia in particular that you've been most proud of, and where you really feel like, you would put it on your wall.
Oh yeah. Well, there's so many because my work is not my work. It's the work of so many community leaders around the world. But I think, there's a couple, one close to home, not too far from you all, which is we support a social enterprise in Detroit that is, it's called the Empowerment Plan. And they provide coats that convert into sleeping bags.
I know. Yeah, I've seen that. The founder is a local woman.
Yeah.
She started as a young person. Yeah, go ahead, keep talking about it.
Yeah, so she's fantastic. And I think she's an example, right, of how somebody can have an idea. And if you can seed them with the resources so that they can lift off and make that vision happen, amazing. And so it's to support the unhoused. It's almost what I call like a jobs first model. So it's not just about handouts, but it's about actually creating employment so that those individuals not only can kind of get back on track, but they can move on to more fulfilling opportunities for themselves and the community that they live in. And then so there's a number of social entrepreneurs that make my heart tick and that I'm very proud of supporting. Another one is something that we've just gotten off the ground. Well, we're like 2 years in now, but with a service organization working here in Southern California, and we're at the center of homelessness in America, right? We have more than 10% of the homeless population right here in Los Angeles. We actually partnered with a service organization called Illumination Foundation, and I am convinced that they are one of the most innovative outfits out there. It's run by a nurse and an investment banker. And so it's that marriage of public health and finance. I think that's really allowed them to do really creative things. And I'm all about partnerships. I dream about bringing unlikely bedfellows together, and I take pride in doing that. And I stay up all night trying to figure out how to make partnerships happen. So you can do more than you would be able to on your own. And so we created a partnership with them and 5 other foundations to do like a really unique property finance fund. So we actually together have pooled all of our money and have given it to the service organization so they can acquire old motels and other kind of multifamily type units and now convert those into long-term supportive housing for the community. And so that not only are people getting off the street, this becomes right a supported community with services on site so they actually get reintegrated back into neighborhoods. So those are kind of 2 immediate examples, but there is one other one that really I think is kind of speaks to every aspect of what I stand for in my work. And it emerged out of the second wave of the COVID crisis this spring in India. So India was hit really hard, right? Like COVID ripped through the country like a hot knife through butter. And it was devastating. I have a lot of family there still. A lot of the community organizations that we work with there had staff that died in numbers, right? Not just like I knew somebody, but most of them had to shut down for a while because they just couldn't operate or they were caring for family members. It was pretty hard sitting on the other side of the world to figure out what can we do.
Right.
And so we actually came together with a local organization there to create a collaborative fund that is well on its way to being it's a $20 million fund already, but the hope is that it's going to become a $50 million fund to do 2 things. It's providing emergency COVID relief, but it's also providing long-term resources to help rebuild the social sector that they're saying has had about a 10-year setback in goals around education, health, livelihoods. So that's a biggie. It's a mouthful. So a little bit, I think that's what a lot of philanthropy jargon without realizing it. So I apologize for that. But those are just kind of a sampling to, give you a feel.
No, and thanks for those because they're so broad, right? And their reach and also, and I think focusing specifically on the empowerment project and a young person who had this amazing idea of having coats turn into sleeping bags for homeless people. And can you, because the whole purpose of this is for our students to see these and for people to see the ways in which young people and their ideas can do what our mission actually says, which is to help make the world a better place. But they may not know how to go about it, right? So you're the perfect person to ask, right? So how does, from soup to nuts, how does a young person, anybody, it doesn't even be an old person, right? It could be me, right? Have this great idea for a project, for an initiative as a social entrepreneur. How does it get to you? And how do you get to them? How do you find them? How do they find you? How does that whole process work that results in your helping fund these initiatives?
Well, that's a big question. So, I think when it comes to work that's kind of what I'll say like social good oriented, I think a really, really big part of it is authenticity. And so if, any of you as Green Hills students or in the Green Hills community or folks that you come across have an idea, right, for something good that they want to do, but no matter what it is, could be climate change, could be housing, whatever, is to just get out there and start doing it. And to do it by getting directly involved, right? There is nothing that speaks stronger than kind of being able to be the direct voice embedded in the communities or in the issue that you want to support. And I think it's that authenticity that allows your voice and your story to get out there in a real way. I think, young people like those of you at Green Hills and, funders out there, they can kind of tell when something's not for real, right? You can peel back those layers pretty quickly. And so I think rooting everything in direct experience is super important. And funders like myself end up finding those because we're passionate about them. So this is going to sound a little cheesy, but I actually think that passion is a big part of making those connections, right? Because if you're passionate about your idea as an entrepreneur, you're going to put in the blood, sweat, and tears, not only to create that model and get it out there, but to advocate for it.
Right.
And if funders have that passion, they're also going to want to find you.
Right.
So I think very much the little bit of the onus is on the entrepreneur, right? To get out there and not be shy and just go for it and start to build those alliances so people can amplify your voice. And the onus is, I guess it's also on the funder, right? If I'm being a good funder, I'm getting out there in communities and learning what the needs are and looking for those innovative solutions. So it's kind of two-way. I actually, it requires both sides to find each other. But I think when it works, there's one basic thing that's part of it, and that's shared values.
Right.
And once your values are aligned, you can make a whole lot happen. I mean, that's how we created that property finance fund to get long-term supportive housing off the ground. That's how Blake created Tom's. Branson got a lot of his ideas off the ground, for social good. So.
Right. You clearly you made a conscious decision to dedicate your career to affecting change within this structure, right? And I'm curious, where did that come from? Like where, and why, with your skills, with the things that you could do, you could easily be working for a hedge fund, right? Like, not to say that hedge funds don't do good things, but you chose this early on in your career. Where does that come from? Where did that get instilled in you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It is interesting. I think I made that conscious decision probably just a little bit later in the game, like probably just after university. So if you look at when I was at Green Hills, like I wasn't, maybe I helped like get a recycling program off the ground, or, I went to a handful of AWARE meetings. I don't know if AWARE is still a club.
In a different form, it's different, just called something different. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I wasn't like that. I wasn't sort of the one making it happen. I was sort of just like kind of in and out. But I think the roots of this do go back to childhood, and that, my family, my dad always had us participate in community service projects. I remember going to the soup kitchen with him, or, packing lunches for communities in need. And it wasn't something we did every day, but those stuck with me. And I think also having exposure to communities different than the one I was growing up with. My mom worked in downtown Detroit and still does. And the handful of times that I would, go with her to the hospital, I'd pay attention to what I saw on the streets. And it was that curiosity, and that frustration or anger, I think, that just started to pique my own interest of what's going on here, what's all this inequity about. And I knew that it was not in isolation, right? Because I spent a handful of summers in India, and was just looking extreme poverty in my eye by stepping out of my family's doorstep. So those things, I think, were always in my mind, in my consciousness.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest things I got from my time at Green Hills, which I didn't realize till university, was this ability to kind of ask the harder questions, and not be afraid to test out ideas or approaches or activities that I wouldn't have done on my own. Right. So it was that confidence that I got. Well, people say oil and water can't mix, but I was convinced you could make it mix, right? Right. And so that principle, I think, fuels my work today. But after I finished college, I was a science major in college, biopsych, but even then I was trying to bring two areas of thought together, biology and psychology. I could pick one. When I graduated, I thought I'd go to med school. It sounded like a really cool thing to do. I wanted to help people. But academically, as I was pursuing it, I was finding like, shoot, this isn't really for me. I'm
Right.
not really into this. Like, yes, I believe in the profession, like, thank goodness for medicine, right?
Yep.
But maybe there's other ways I can help people. And so that's when I took the big leap. I actually went to India for a year after finishing college. I was part of a program that was similar to the Peace Corps. And that's where I got my first kind of direct experience in international development and social change. And it was through that I learned a lot about myself, what makes me tick. And I learned I was more of a macro level thinker than a micro level. Right. And I was much more stimulated about population level analysis than that one-to-one, for example, like doctor-patient, type of scenario. So I came back, and what did I do? I asked, I came back from India, and then I was really confused. I said, oh shoot, well, this whole plan I had doesn't make sense for me. So I asked my brother, my Green Hills alum coach, what to do. And he said, well, it sounds like you're interested in this other stuff. Start writing people, start that, which is a tool that Green Hills gave us. Don't be afraid to get out there and put yourself, out for an informational interview or write a letter, communicate your interests. And so I wrote my senator, who was all of our senator for a long time, the late Carl Levin. Sadly, he just passed.
I know.
So a big life to honor there. Yeah. And he took a risk on me, and I started as a junior staffer. And I think at that point, then I realized, like, okay, like, I see the world in a much broader context now, not just within one discipline, right? I was thinking as a scientist prior, but now I could think about this as more of a political scientist.
Right.
And that's kind of then what led me, I think, down that path. And I made that commitment of, like, I don't quite know what it's going to be. Every job I've had, I didn't know I was going to have it before, right? I didn't know it existed. Yeah. But it was more of this conviction of, I know that I'm not okay with the way things are in the world. And I know that I have an ability to help affect that change. So I'm going to put myself in places where I can explore innovative ways to do that.
Yeah. So I'm a head of school, I'm not an interviewer, but I am interviewing. So I do know this, that you've managed to answer so many of my questions, and you're wonderful, right? And which is both great, and now I'm just stuck. No, but you should know that Senator Levin's grandchild was a Green Hills student. I don't know whether.
Oh, really? Oh, I had no idea.
But I do have, I love that the way in which you connected, of course, your Green Hills experience to your career. And, I think a really good lesson or reminder for our kids is, to remain the way you have, to remain simultaneously focused on your passion, but open to possibilities, right? Can you talk a little bit about that trajectory of yours and opportunities that presented themselves to you, but not out of luck? You had positioned yourself to take advantage of them, because these are huge responsibilities and jobs that you've taken that you don't just sort of stumble into. So talk a little bit about yes, on one hand, you said every job you've had, you didn't sort of necessarily clamor for, but yet you were open. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I think I love that framing of sticking true to your passion, but being open. I think, as I look back on my career, it's been a gradual, right? It's sort of been this gradual winding path to sort of, it's got me to where I am today, and I'm excited to see where it's going to take me, right? I think it's a journey that never ends. I think my passions have evolved as well, but a big part of my passion has also been getting to know myself, and that work that I've done to understand what excites me, what lights me up, is also a big part of it. And I've really kind of started to hone that, not just as a passion, but my passion has become my skill set. Right. And so then I'm able to firmly advocate for myself, but I'm also able to see when a potential new opportunity might be an exciting one, So I think that openness allows you to also take risks that you wouldn't maybe otherwise have had the courage to take, or known that there might have been an opportunity in there. You know, I had, as part of my time with, you could even look at this on my time in Green Hills, but also my time, you know, at the University of Michigan, but particularly in graduate school at Harvard. I kind of was going against the grain, against, and not intentionally, but it's just sort of whatever the core approach to the curriculum or the recommended sort of class set, it never fully spoke to me. And so by the time I think I was in graduate school, I had a little bit more of that confidence burning and that kind of passion burning inside me, where I forced my own curriculum. And it wasn't easy, right? And I wasn't popular for doing it. I was convinced that I could merge the public policy school with the public health school and the business school. And that if I really was going to drive global change, that I needed that skill from that I would get if I was getting an MBA, but apply it to the social sector. And dating myself, but back in the 90s, that wasn't a thing, right? Like people didn't, you didn't look at it that way.
No, you're right. You mean back in the 90s like this?
Oh no, you can please put that away.
No, so I like, that's actually more of an 80s hairstyle, I think.
Yeah,
sort
a
of,
nice little mushroom top there.
It started in the 80s, very kind of Princess Di-ish, you know. So
Yeah, how dare you?
I'm sorry, I couldn't. But part of my responsibility is to embarrass our alums as much as possible.
Well, the fact that that even made it in there is just sort of speaks to my own confidence, I guess.
You look marvelous then, you look marvelous now. But I love that, you know, in your senior quote, right? Like it actually very much, so much of your, I don't know if you've gone back and looked at it recently, but you know, it really, all of the quotes, I love that you're a Smith. Are you still a Smiths fan? Are you still? Yeah, you've got it all in here.
May have moved on a bit.
You got U2, you've got the Smiths. But you know, I love that, you know, you're the Cat Stevens quote that you've got so much to say what you mean what you're thinking, and think anything. Right? That's a lovely quote. I think that's what you've been doing in so many ways. So very prescient. I won't go through the rest of the yearbook.
Yeah, please.
There is a prom picture in here, I think. No. So
yeah, so there's that.
Yeah, I've learned that you and your husband and your two daughters, that you've brought you know, sort of bus person's holiday, right? You've brought your work home, and you've made service and civic, you know, responsibilities, social responsibility part of your family life too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this is aspiration, right? And that I want to be doing more of it. So my daughters are 5 and 9.
Same age as my children, by the way. So excellent.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic. Love that. We'll have to get them all together when we come to Ann Arbor.
Please do.
The, you know, so for me, I think, again, right, because my work is my passion, it kind of doesn't end, right, at this screen. So I very much kind of, I'm happiest when I'm living my passion. And I think that also means, you know, instilling those values in my kids, and whatever they make of it, you know, I'm excited to see. It may have nothing to do, you know, with what I'm doing. But I think both Farouk and I, and Farouk is from Kansas, he went to a school very similar to Green Hills. In fact, one of Green Hills' former head of schools had come from Pembroke. So
Pembroke, yeah, sure.
He went, yeah. And so I think we had that similar sort of like coaching and confidence in us, and both of us tended to kind of migrate to how do we merge these kind of unlikely fields together. He's a science writer and a novelist. Wow. And we both tend to be not okay with the way things are. Right. And so we want to, as a family, get out there and help things, make things better. And so I do work with the schools, like I've partnered with my kids' schools to kind of develop social change programs, created a whole kind of what we call agents of change curriculum and practice area with the preschool that was about, you know, how do we get access, how do we create access to social justice issues, but also make our kids realize they are agents of change and give them agency in that process. And so that was about meeting them where they were at, which is what you all do, right?
Yeah.
As educators. And so, the example there was around, how do we redistribute food? Because they kept asking about hunger. They would feel hungry. They would see, people on the street, and they would ask, oh, well, this is like, what can we do? Or, can I give them my lunch? And so then we started to look at like, well, what can we do as a tiny little school community? And we started to, participate in food distribution activities. And some of it was very kid oriented, like picking fruit from trees. We live in Los Angeles, so there's fruit everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? And getting it to an organization that could then get it to the communities. And so it's just these very tangible activities. Voting. My daughter was very much part of all the phone banking that I did.
Right.
In the past elections, and I took her to vote, and she's the one that entered my ballot for me.
I did that with my daughter as well.
That's great.
Awesome.
It's great. So these are it's giving them agency in areas that they might not think that they do, and following their passions. Birthday parties become fundraisers if they want. My daughter's a passionate environmentalist. As a 9-year-old, and so her, one of her last birthdays was raising funds for the vaquitas that are nearly extinct. The younger one is very much about community connections. So we try to engage with those interests. So it's nothing major, right? I mean, I would want to do more, but it's how do you make the farmer's market and the soccer game, those are your typical weekend activities. But how do you make social change part of those weekend activities as well?
Beautiful. I'm going to be so selfish here and say that I so wish that you lived here in Ann Arbor so we can engage you more, that your kids went to this school or could go to this school. Sorry, do you have any plans for moving back to Ann Arbor?
We'd certainly be open to it, honestly.
Your whole family's here. Come on, your mother. I'm going to get your mother to call you and talk to her. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, and you've given it, is what advice would you have for, our students here? But that's what this has been. It's been awesome. So I'm actually going to ask you, what advice do you have for me in my school? Like what, you were here, the school's changed. Like we have, you said you were part of AWARE, and our DEI and affinity groups and all of the work that we do with inclusion and equity and social justice, right, is you'd love to see, and we're doing the appropriate and necessary work there. We have a great service learning program and director, and sort of what we're doing, particularly connecting with Detroit as well as the local community. But we're never done with any of that work. So from what you remember of Green Hills, or just your experience with your kids' schools, and what would you do? Like what should we be doing here? What
a great question. I'd almost start that answer by saying, let's get a group of students together and interview them, right? And in fact, I did that. I called Serena, Anya, and Annika yesterday to say, hey, look, I'm talking to your head of school. Like, give me some dirt, like what's some of the good and what's some of the bad. And what was really inspiring, Peter, is that they said a lot of what I had felt when I was there, and that Green Hills gives you agency. It forces accountability, and that you are the one that needs to create, your journey, and it's up to you, right, to kind of get out there and make it happen, but that you're supported. Right. And that you have, you're in an environment where you can try things that you might not otherwise in another institution. And I have direct experience of that, because when I was at Green Hills, I actually left for a semester and I went to Pioneer, and then I came back. And so, there's something that you guys have maintained around that is amazing. I think in terms of what you can do, you use the phrase necessary and appropriate around kind of like the diversity and inclusion, which I get. And I would say an institution like Green Hills is so intimate and so special, in that it can reach far beyond necessary and appropriate. And to kind of sit with the student body and sit with the alum and other educators, particularly educators that are working in spaces that are in communities with extreme inequity. And ask yourself as an educational institution, how can we be a leader? And not a follower as it relates to diversity and equity and inclusion, not just internally, but externally. And you're asking those questions anyway, right? But it's just, pushing everybody to say, like, let's do it bigger. Not so that we get the big press release, right? I'm not an education expert, but it's a sad state in America.
Yeah.
And so how can institutions like Greenhouse help uplift education for everyone across, or however you define that broader community?
No, I mean, I'm so glad you said that. It is, I hope that this school speaks of its privilege in a way that compels us to do something with it, right? As opposed to, the privilege that we have in this building with these resources, with our parent body. I mean, Ann Arbor is a very privileged community, and privileged not in the pejorative sense that some people want to use that, but we're so privileged with a smart, thoughtful, resourced, and frankly, temperamentally, a community that cares about, the right things most of the time. And, what are we going to do with that? Right. And you are a great example of doing something with that. And we're so proud of you for doing that.
Thank you.
And it's so great to have you as a spokesperson for us, and also, helping us be better by helping the world be better. So thank you.
No, thank you. And look, I'm a proud Greenhouse, representative, and I was recently at the school a month ago when I was home, and got to go to a field hockey game and a cross country meet, and walk in with Serena and see her soon to be locker. It was right before orientation, or
right.
And it was so cool. Until like, whoa, the forum is still there, and I don't know what it's called now, but and my kids were with me, and so they saw where I was, and I was like, oh,
great. I'm sorry I missed you.
Yeah, no, we'll be back. We'll be back. Okay, it was a quick visit. We were there for the field hockey. We kind of snuck into the school. So I love how the athletics program has grown, by the way. But what was really special when I did that short little walk, and thank you to the athletic director, I can't remember her name, for letting us in, because we weren't supposed to be there, was that on the wall, the faculty. Many of them are there today that were there when I was there. And whether retired and still active in the community or currently teaching, that is one of the world's greatest resources.
It's our best, it's our finest resource.
I didn't tap into all of them, or know. I mean, I wasn't the greatest student. You can ask Mr. Zellers right now. But it also was okay. Like Greenhouse let that be okay for me, and the Friedlanders, picked me up where I needed to be, picked up, so that I could continue on that learning journey. And that's very special, and it's crazy that I am still in touch with those teachers, and Marcia Mom and others, and they remember. Right, they remember things from when we were there, and you don't get that anywhere. That is gold. That's gold, and I get to share that with my kids and my nieces and people. People hear about you guys everywhere. I mean, Mr. Zellers came to my office in California at Tom's, and so my team met my history teacher. Like, that's wild.
Well, we'll be out there again this spring. So
oh, nice. Okay.
We will be in touch for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to help make that gathering happen.
Good. And I think I'm going to a field hockey game in about an hour. So.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, I know the Berries have got some record breaking in their blood. No pressure, but Annika, I have a feeling she's going to kick me off that Greenhouse record board in just a few weeks. I have a feeling, if not a couple years. She's got some time ahead of her.
Proud auntie.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, and we'll see you when you come back and visit, and then out in LA when we're out there.
Absolutely. Go Griffins.
Thank you, Priya.